Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to Tech Tag. In this second episode, we will be speaking about blockchain disrupting the global market. In our previous episode, we spoke about cybersecurity, and the videos are available in this website right here and on YouTube. Let me speak to you a little bit about this project. The idea behind Tech Tag is to connect you guys with the best technology out there. During our webinars, you can select which topics you like, and then we will make sure to talk with companies and experts in order to connect with you. For example, in this occasion, this second episode was selected by you, the audience, and you guys chose blockchain. So now we got these three excellent experts that will speak today. Our first expert of the day is Niklas Kossow. He's a PhD researcher at Hertie School. His research focuses on the use of digital technologies in the fight against corruption. Enjoy.
Hello from Berlin. Thanks a lot, Hugo, and thanks, Michele. Thank you both for the invitation. I'll start sharing my screen with you all. And yeah, so I'm here sort of as an introductory speaker because we're talking about blockchain technology or distributed ledger technology, which is a more inclusive term for this, as an anti-corruption tool. So why am I here to talk to you about this? As Hugo said, I just actually submitted my PhD on the use of digital technologies in anti-corruption. You can see my lovely PhD title on the right there. And because I sort of am an expert on different digital technologies and anti-corruption, in 2017, when sort of the blockchain hype was at its peak, people came to me and asked me, like, what do you think about blockchain? And how do you think about using blockchain potentially as an anti-corruption tool? And why people had this idea is sort of due to its key features, which I don't have to go into too much detail here because a lot of you know this already. So this intermediation, taking out the middleman out of many transactions, the element of transparency, and also the element of accountability that is attached to blockchain technology. So this is why I started looking into this topic. I wrote several papers on this for Transparency International, for the German Development Corporation, GIZ, and also some academic papers. So now I'm happy to talk a little bit about this with you. What I found interesting about this aspect of transparency is that actually the most blockchain applications that you see nowadays, they are not necessarily so transparent, right? Because they're private or hybrid blockchains that only share a certain amount of information. But a lot of hope is sort of attached to this idea of blockchain enabling transparency. That's why I put up here this quote by the European Parliament Research Service, who wrote a paper on blockchain and basically said that enabling transparency is a big promise of blockchain technology, and it provides a fully auditable and valid ledger of transactions. They even call it a transparency machine that anyone can join, and as a result can view all information on that network. That is not entirely correct, right? In a private blockchain, not everybody can see everything on the network. And yeah, most applications that I found that can be used also in this context, yeah, they tend to be at least a hybrid of different blockchain implementations. So, but let's first, when we talk about blockchain as a potential anti-corruption tool, let's ask, what is corruption, right? Corruption is a wicked problem. So it's a problem that doesn't have a simple answer or a simple solution to it. Corruption, if you define it by transparency, if you use the definition, the definition used by Transparency International, is the abuse of entrusted power of private gain. So usually we talk about corruption in a state context, so a public official or a politician who uses this power that he has entrusted to him by the citizens for his own private benefit. You can specify corruption according to the type of corruption we're talking about, so bribery, which most people associate with it, but also nepotism, extortion, or patronage. But also we can specify it according to the level of corruption. So petty corruption, the day-to-day when you have to bribe a policeman, or if you have to bribe in order to get good grades in school, or grand corruption, so political corruption, where we're really talking about large sums of money. And here's where I want to enter the first poll to sort of get to know you all a bit better. Is corruption a major issue in your country? And here we have the different options, yes, in the form of petty corruption, in the form of grand corruption, or not really, or maybe you actually don't know because you never really thought about what the situation is about corruption. So let's give you a couple of seconds. Actually pretty split, but most of you said, yeah, in the form of grand corruption, which makes a lot of sense because, yeah, I mean, petty corruption in many countries is now quite under control, but grand corruption really is this like also uncomfortable feeling when you don't know where does lobbying stop and where does corruption start. But let's go back to the actual issue of DLT, so distributed ledger technology. Can DLT be an antidote to corruption? I mean, the short answer is no. It's a technology, it depends what you do with it. Just using the technology will never really eradicate corruption. Corruption is, as I said, a wicked problem, doesn't have an easy answer. The long answer is really, and that's the frustrating thing about academia, it depends. So there is not one solution, but when I looked at DLT as an anti-corruption tool, I analyzed it slightly more systematically and looked at blockchain as a tool that addresses corruption risks. And here, basically, what we're talking about is risk factors that enable or facilitate corruption. So I think we have to, at this point, accept corruption will always be there in one form or the other, or in less intensity or higher intensity, but you can limit sort of the risk factors that lead to corruption. And there we have individual factors, so sort of individual motivations due to a lack of income, lack of opportunity, or just greed. Conflicts of interests or lack of knowledge of skills of people in positions of power. Then working process factors, so a lot of personal discretion or lack of controls in different work processes, non-transparent records or non-transparent decision making, basically the entire organization of work processes. We have organizational factors, so poor guidelines or strategies within an organization, unclear mandates for the people who work there, the organizational culture, often leading to informal practices, and also inadequate HR or finance regulations, all these amongst others. And then finally, we have contextual factors, so factors outside the scope of an organization. So again, an unclear mandate for an organization. The powers of the authorities are unclear. Inefficient institutions do not really help you to deal with public life, or also poor public finances. So again, here I want to launch a second poll, asking what type of corruption risk factors do you think are most likely to be addressed through distributed ledger technology? Don't worry, I'll talk a little bit about that, of course, later. But I first wanted to hear what's your opinion now that I sort of briefly presented corruption risk factors. All right, you can see, and I would totally agree with you, individual factors, they're not really able to address. Organizational factors are indeed some of those that you can address through blockchain. In my opinion, you're slightly underestimating the working process factors. Because yes, blockchain works as an anti-corruption tool, but in very specific settings and by addressing specific corruption risk. And the ones that we identified, looking at examples from the supply chain management, from data security and public administration, but also from aid distribution in international development, we found organizational factors and working process factors, they can really be addressed by changing the way that an organization thinks about storing its data and by changing underlying processes, and also by giving better access to data that is recorded. Contextual factors and individual factors are really usually out of the scope of a blockchain application, unless you really think in the future of these more overarching applications where blockchain becomes a bigger thing. But at the moment, we don't really see individual or contextual factors to be addressed. So how, in these contexts, definitely when we have a blockchain application, we usually see an improving paper trail and the data availability in a specific context. We see an increase of transparency between stakeholders that can include the public, but also if you just imagine an application that brings together different stakeholders working on the same topic, you can increase the transparency between them. Finally, we also improve data security and accountability, so you know who changed data, who deleted data, who had access to data at a certain point. I want to talk to you about, like, just present to you two projects which I analyzed when I wrote a couple of papers on blockchain. The first one is True Budget. That's a project that was developed by the KfW, so the German Development Bank. They currently pilot that in 3 different countries, and essentially it's a workflow management tool. So it can be used for project finance or budget support and tie in different partners. So the nice thing about True Budget is, while it was developed by the KfW, it's open source. So you can find it on the GitHub, and you can just download and adapt it to your needs. And basically it gives you the ability to bring different partners together without giving control to one entity. So basically it creates trust between the partners because they work on a common and joint tool to manage their workflows, and not one partner has a full responsibility for the workflow management tool. This can basically create greater efficiency in project management because all partners can access the same database, and also address potential corruption risks. Why do I mention potential here, and also highlighted that in the text? Because of course, when I interviewed them, rightfully the KfW stressed that they don't have really an issue with corruption. Rather, they see that of course there are corruption risks in certain contexts, but they have they always had due diligence and auditing tools ready to make sure that the money that they spend is rightfully spent and not sort of siphoned off. But of course, any process that has that involves big money sums has potential corruption risks. And if you have this type of tool, yeah, I think you can lower them. Then the other example I wanted to give you is Georgia's land registry. Land registry is actually an issue which you'll find a lot in anti-corruption, and especially in the context of blockchain anti-corruption, because in a if you have the power to change the data in a land registry, basically you open up a gate for land grabbing. Especially poorer people suffer a lot from that in some countries. And what the blockchain in Georgia that was developed by Bitfury's Exona project basically does, it takes the already functioning digital land registry that had digital versions of cadastre entries, and it adds a security layer to the system. So basically it creates a hash of the land titles and adds them to the Bitcoin blockchain. They're timestamped, so you know when they were added. And so they, in this way, on the blockchain, they serve as a proof of authenticity of land claims, as an immutable proof of authenticity. So basically, if you get a land title, you can use the hash on the Bitcoin blockchain in order to show that this land title is original and true and was not altered later on. So basically, that takes away the corruption risk of a potentially fraudulent paper trail, but also of the lack of control of one or two people who might be in control of the entries and could change them. So basically, bigger accountability and thus limiting the corruption risks. And so, sort of getting towards the end of my presentation, I want to ask you the final poll. Do you think blockchain can be useful as an anti-corruption tool? Because of course, I could have presented to you more examples of tools, but I think I gave you some idea on how well we can rate blockchain as a tool in this context. And I'm happy that you're actually quite optimistic. I think I'm probably myself a little bit less optimistic than you. I think there's a few settings where it's really applicable to be a successful anti-corruption tool. But generally, there's many different applications for blockchain. And I'm looking forward to seeing those in the future as well. I want to make one last note before I hand it back to Michele. There's a lot of anti-corruption research that asks the gender question, because women are very proportionately affected by corruption, and also the large power networks between men, mostly men, often lend themselves to corruption. Also, the blockchain field is really male-dominated, and often you see 80 to 90% of the people that develop blockchain applications are men. And I want to bring this up here because I noted, like, after I agreed and I was happy to accept to join this webinar, I noticed that we were an all-male panel and there was basically no woman involved in the organization. And that is always a bit sad. And I think I don't really want to criticize that, but I want to make the point that we should think about this, because less inclusive environments always lead to worse results, and you see that also in development. And this is why I just wanted to note this here at the end. But mainly, I'm looking forward to your questions and to our discussion. And thanks a lot for the attention.
Thank you very much, Niklas. That was very interesting. Actually, you raised an unrelated topic at the end about women in tech. We have had this sort of issues in the past, in 5 years, discussing. I'm curious what you raised this topic actually. What is exactly that you're raising this topic about the women in tech?
Well, I just noticed that it's something that I noticed when accepting the invitation. I noticed I should have brought that up at this stage, but I noticed it too late, because it always takes me a while to process this and to think about it as well, because of course, I'm male as well. And I just wanted to make people think about it and raise it at the end, because gender and corruption there's a lot of research about the connection, and it's something that I also noticed when I was working around in the blockchain space. It's
absolutely. And we've done studies, we've done also try to make it more inclusive. Perhaps it's something we can address in the future regarding these sort of events. At the moment, obviously, it's only online, but obviously, if a woman would like to be part of it, it's always welcome. Hopefully, when we do physical events, that can change as well.